call came on a Wednesday in November 2016. A probate attorney in Brattleboro, Vermont, was trying to locate living relatives of a man named Harold Prentice. Harold had been a school janitor. He had no children. He drove an old Honda. He ate sardines from a tin for lunch. And he had just left behind $8 million. His co-workers were stunned. His neighbors were stunned. The woman at the post office, who had sorted his mail for 20 years, told a local reporter she nearly fell off her stool. Nobody knew. Not one person in Brattleboro had any idea. But to understand how we got here, you have to go back, not to some windfall, not to an inheritance. You have to go back to a 16-year-old boy in 1940, sitting in a church basement in Brattleboro with nowhere to sleep and $11 in his pocket. Harold Prentice was born in 1924 and orphaned at 14. He never finished high school. By 17, he was sweeping floors at Brattleboro Union High School for 60 cents an hour. He was quiet, precise. He showed up before anyone else arrived and left after most had gone home. Every morning, Harold woke at 5:04. Not 5 o'clock, not 5:15, 5:04. He made a cup of Folgers instant coffee, always Folgers, stirred it twice, and walked the 6 blocks to work in whatever weather Vermont had decided to throw at him that day. Rain, ice, February wind. It did not matter. He rented the same 2-room apartment on Elliott Street for 31 years. The landlord offered to sell it to him twice. Harold declined both times. He had other plans for that money, plans he kept entirely to himself. What nobody at the school ever knew was that for one single week in the winter of 1951, Harold had taken a bus to Boston. He never explained why. He came back 7 days later, said nothing, and went straight back to work. That trip would change everything. In Boston, Harold had walked into the public library on Boylston Street and spent 5 days reading every book he could find about the stock market. He was not looking for tips. He was not looking for shortcuts. He was looking for a system. He found one in a thin volume by an economist named Benjamin Graham. The concept was almost boring in its simplicity. Buy index funds, reinvest dividends. Wait. In April of 1952, Harold walked into a brokerage office on Main Street in Brattleboro and opened an account with $62. The broker looked at him over his glasses. Harold was wearing his work uniform. The broker processed the order anyway. Every month after that, without exception, Harold set aside 20% of his paycheck. In 1954, that was about $53 a month. He tracked every single deposit on a yellow legal pad at his kitchen table, column by column, month by month, year by year, decade by decade. Then 1973 arrived. The market collapsed. Harold's modest portfolio dropped by nearly 40% in under a year. Some of his co-workers who had dabbled in stocks sold everything in a panic and swore they'd never touch Wall Street again. Harold did not sell a single share. He bought more. That same year, the transmission on his 1974 Ford Pinto started slipping badly. He nursed it for 17 years. When the floorboards finally rusted through in 1991 and it could not be revived, he bought a used 1988 Civic for $4,300, cash, from a dealer on Route 9. He drove that car for another 12 years. Lunch for Harold was the same every day. A tin of sardines, 2 slices of white bread, an apple in winter when they were cheap at the market on Flat Street. He ate alone at a folding table in the boiler room. Not out of sadness, he simply had no interest in spending $3 at the diner when a tin of sardines cost 40 cents. In 1986, a colleague approached Harold with an opportunity. A friend of a friend was raising money for a real estate deal in southern New Hampshire, promised returns of 30% annually. Harold listened politely over a cup of coffee in the break room. He said he would think about it. He never called back. The deal collapsed 18 months later, wiping out the savings of 4 of his co-workers. By 1985, Harold's portfolio had quietly crossed $100,000. He did not celebrate. He made his coffee. He walked to work. But here is the math that was happening beneath the surface. The dividends being reinvested were now generating more annual income than his salary. He was, at this moment, technically already wealthy. He simply did not act like it. In 1997, Harold was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. The surgery cost him $41,000 out of pocket, more than he had earned in any single year of his working life. He withdrew the money without ceremony. He was back to investing within 3 months. The dot-com crash in 2000 erased roughly a third of his portfolio. Harold was 76 years old. Most people his age were moving money into bonds and certificates of deposit. Harold rebalanced, held his index funds, and kept the legal pad updated. Then 2008 came and cut his portfolio nearly in half in 18 months. Harold was 84 years old. His holdings had fallen from somewhere north of $3 million to under $2 million. A financial advisor, had Harold ever had one, would almost certainly have told him to move to cash. Harold bought index funds. Harold retired from the school in 2003 at age 79. His colleagues threw him a small party in the gymnasium. Someone brought a sheet cake from the Price Chopper on Putney Road. Someone else gave a short speech. Harold thanked every person individually, shook each hand, and walked home the same 6 blocks he had always walked. What happened after 2008 was the final, almost surreal chapter. The market recovered. Then it climbed. Then it kept climbing for the better part of a decade. The dividends from Harold's holdings were now generating over $300,000 a year, reinvested automatically, compounding into a number that would have seemed fictional to the 16-year-old boy in that church basement. Harold spent his last years reading library books and walking the same 6 blocks he had walked for 6 decades. His neighbors describe him as pleasant, unremarkable, and a little hard of hearing by the end. He still made Folgers at 5:04. Old habits, it turns out, are the most durable things a person can own. And now, finally, the question the probate attorney was really asking. Where did a man with an 8th grade education and a janitor's salary learn to do any of this? Inside Harold's bedroom closet, taped carefully to the inside of the door, was a framed index card, written in his own hand. A quote from Benjamin Graham. The investor's chief problem, Graham had written, is likely to be himself. Harold had first read those words in Boston in 1951. He had never forgotten them. When the estate was fully catalogued, the number was $8,047,312. Harold left $6 million to 3 local organizations: the Brooks Memorial Library, a food pantry on Flat Street, and a scholarship fund at Brattleboro Union High School, the same building he had mopped for 50 years. The remaining $2 million went to a distant cousin in Maine he had never once met. The woman at the post office was interviewed by the Reformer, Brattleboro's local paper. She said she kept thinking about all the years she had watched Harold walk past her window. Same coat, same pace, same time every morning. You just never knew, she told the reporter. You really just never knew. Harold Prentice never earned more than $23,800 in a single year. He never had a financial advisor. He never owned property. He never bought a stock based on a tip or a television segment. He simply saved 20%, bought index funds, reinvested every dividend, and refused to stop for 64 consecutive years. The story of Harold Prentice is not really about money. It is about the extraordinary power of a decision made once and then never revisited. He decided in 1952 what kind of person he was going to be, and then he just kept being that person. Through every crash, every temptation, every hard year, and every good one. Somewhere in Brattleboro, a yellow legal pad sat on his kitchen table, every column filled in the same careful hand. The last entry was dated October 2016, 6 weeks before he died. He had written the portfolio total at the bottom of the final page. Then he closed the pad, made his coffee, and went to bed. If this story made you think differently about what wealth actually looks like, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the most important financial lessons rarely come with a price tag.